pasensya na kayo guys, first time kong gamitin to ng actual webinar. Ayun. So I guess it's being shown on the screen now. Okay. So good afternoon. I'm happy to be the first resource person of IECEP QCSC Student Chapter. And I'm glad also to hear that based on survey, most of the students prefer to have a discussion about broadcasting. It's been a while, a long while, since broadcasting has been in the centerpiece of interest of the people and thankfully the students. So I hope that you would explore the possibility to have a career in broadcasting. Okay, so broadcasting in general, so in general, we have a lot of topics to discuss. So I have listed here the essential subtopics that you should be aware of when you venture into the broadcasting industry. So to give you a background, being in the broadcasting industry, and if you're really passionate and willing to learn, you'll be able to cover maybe around 90% of the whole spectrum of communication. That includes microwave systems, satellite systems, cameras, optics, acoustics, audio, what else? Fiber optics, and recently the mix of telecommunication through the over-the-top technology delivery and contribution through streaming or remote IP links. Yun yung pinakabago lately. So if you really wanted to learn everything in broadcasting, you'll be a well-rounded engineer. You'll be able to cover so many fields of practice that whenever you decide to move to a different communication practice, it would be easy for you to adapt. Okay. However, having said that, it takes lots of years and patience to be able to attain a certain level of competency. Okay. When I say competency, you're not yung jack of all trades, master of none. You can still be jack of all trades, but you can have mastery to different disciplines. And in broadcast, I have listed several standards that are essential for your guidance. Okay, so we have the FCC, Code of Federal Regulations 47, which basically covers all the rules for AM, FM, and TV. So I think it's also helpful if you read those standards for board exam purposes. Anyway, it would be less than 100 pages lang naman, and it's easy to familiarize yourself with the standards there. That's basically the basis of the analog broadcast in the Philippines, very similar to what they use in North America. And then for digital, you go to the Arrive website. Actually, it's DIBEG or dibeg.org. They have all the standards for digital transmission, including data broadcasting. I've also listed the Society of Motion Pictures and Television Engineers for video and some audio. ITU basically covers some recommendations also for video formats, audio formats, and interchange formats, and MPEG. So I'm sure a lot of you have heard MPEG. It would be crazy for an ECE student to have not heard about MPEG, diba? You should know about MPEG already at this stage. Now, there's so many standards for MPEG. Maybe you're aware of MPEG-2, MPEG-4. So we have H.265, which is the next generation. So basically, we're going to cover a general discussion about TV transmission here. for analog and digital. Okay, I've done. I've added some information also for your appreciation. I only have around 59 slides because this would only be like a 1.5 hour or 2 hour session. I've tried my best to capture all the essential topics here to give you a background. So broadcast bands. So for AM broadcast, we start from 558 kilohertz up to 1705 kilohertz or 1.7 megahertz. Okay. For television, we have the low band from channel 2 to channel 6, which is from 54 megahertz up to 88 megahertz. And then we have FM 88 up to 108 megahertz. So many are a lot of the people are not aware that in FM we use the channels 201 up to 300. But anyway, just forget about it. And then for television high band VHF, we have channel 7 to 13. So that's 174 megahertz up to 216 megahertz. And then we suddenly jump to the UHF, which is band 4. Okay. Before, when I was still a student, when you read the textbook, the range of UHF frequencies for broadcast application is from 470 up to 890 megahertz, which consists of band 4 and band 5. Okay. So, but because of a decision in the International Telecommunications Union due to the clamor by the telecommunication companies for more frequencies because of there's not much frequencies available for them to deploy new technologies, the ITU decided to take away band 5, which was traditionally part of broadcasting. So it was the band 5 has been classified for telecommunication use. So that's where you have your 4Gs. Yeah. So now we're only contented with band 4. And band 4 is from 470 megahertz up to 700 megahertz, equals to channel 14 to 51. Okay. So the list of AM stations in NCR as an example. So I hope you can read it. Can you check if you can read the text and the screen? Okay. So you will notice, okay, this is more of a general discussion para mabilis so we can accelerate our discussion. You will see that the location of the AM stations are mostly in Obando, Bulacan, part of Cavite, Malanday, Valenzuela, except for a few which is located in Quezon City. Okay. Now, why majority of AM stations are located in those areas? Because AM propagation is best if it's in a high conductivity environment. So salty area, fish ponds are the ideal sites for AM transmission. So propagation is better. However, of course, there are ways to put an AM station in areas other than the high conductivity areas. For example, if you want to put an AM station in Baguio, you cannot find seawater in Baguio, diba? So, but there are engineering techniques wherein you can transform the nature or the condition of the soil to mimic or replicate the conditions of high conductivity salty water. Okay? So, you'll put some chemical treatments on the ground. Okay? Pero there's some laws that you need to follow because some of the chemical treatments that they use to improve the ground conductivity is toxic. So, kung kinain ng kalabaw or baka, tas kinain yung kalabaw, kambing, whatever, there's a possibility that you'll be poisoned. Anyway, next, FM stations, example again for Metro Manila. So everything is full, punong-puno tayo, from 88.3 up to 107.5. Now for FM, since it's considered as a space wave as against AM, which is ground wave, so you can put it anywhere you want for as long as you satisfy certain conditions such as elevation, the terrain, and your service area. Okay. Now, no two engineers will make the same design in terms of servicing the franchise area and how to deploy their antenna system and transmitters. Even the conduct of the coverage and interference study, they may differ in the approach. It all depends on the general objective given to the design. Okay. There might be similarities, but they cannot be identical for two engineers. There's always a difference. It might be slight, maybe large, maybe difference of opinion. Okay. So that's the beauty of being a design engineer. You are constrained to the design criteria given to you by your employer, which is a TV network, or a client who has engaged your services to do the technical feasibility study. So you should, as a student, you should be able to learn the techniques of doing the coverage study using conventional the F50/50 chart. If you're not aware of the chart, how many people who are not aware of the chart? I assume that you've taken broadcast engineering already. So I'd like to know if you're familiar or not familiar with the F50/50 chart. Anybody? So I assume you don't know about the F50/50 chart. We can have a different session on how to use the charts. But basically, those charts can be found on the CFR47 standard that I mentioned earlier. Okay, so if you search on Google CFR47, you'll be routed to the link of the FCC, and you can download the charts. They have an explanation also on how to use the charts there, but if it's the first time that you've encountered it, the learning process might be longer. But if you want, we can do a session, maybe good for 45 minutes to do the coverage prediction on a different time to speed up your learning process. Okay, so the F50/50 chart applies for AM. They have the ground conductivity chart there with the contour map, and then for for FM and low band and high band VHF. Okay. So if you look at the FM stations here, notice that there's a space of 800 kilohertz per channel. So we started with 88.3 plus 800 kilohertz would be the next channel, plus 8 plus 8 plus 8, which is effectively one channel should be 4 channels away. Each channel is equivalent to 200 kilohertz. Every FM station has a bandwidth of 200 kilohertz. So to avoid interference, the next channel should be 4 channels away. That's the concept, okay? And we have to follow it. So effectively, for the whole band of frequency from 88 to 108, we are only using 1/4. 25% of the whole band or FM ang utilized lang. So we're wasting the other 75. Okay? So this is a classic example of the transmission inefficiencies in analog. Okay? Okay, move. Manual. Okay, where's my cursor? Wait. So if we go to TV station, NCR again as an example. So I've listed here the VHF operators, the major networks. So we have ABS-CBN on channel 2, People's Television Network Incorporated, ABC Development, also known as TV5, and then GMA Network on high band VHF, Channel 7, Radio Philippines Network, RPN, which is the one being used by CNN Philippines now, Zoe Broadcasting, and IBC 13 or Intercontinental Broadcasting Corporation. Those are in VHF. Now we go to UHF. Okay, there was a time that nobody wants a channel in UHF because most of the TVs then are only VHF capable. So there's not much business sense. So, but now broadcast is quite profitable. In fact, with the number of broadcasters in the Philippines, everyone can earn a revenue, survive, pay their talents, the bills, etc. So it's quite good business. So for UHF, we have SBN 21. Okay, I don't know if you've heard of these stations. Then we have Ankara Broadcasting, which is owned by ABS-CBN. Then we have Net 25, owned by Eagle Broadcasting. Next, we have Channel 27, CityNet, under Republic Broadcasting System, which is GMA actually. And then Raja Broadcasting, or Ramon Jacinto Broadcasting, we call it RJ. Then Channel 31 is RMN, Radio Mindanao Network, now owned and operated by Beam Broadcast Enterprises and affiliated media. Can you follow my pace, or am I doing it quite fast? Or should I do it slower? Just let me know. And then Channel 33 is Zoe Broadcasting. So you notice some of the VHF operators have a UHF channel also. Not all of them. Okay. Well, some sold it a long time ago. Okay. Channel 35 is Delta Broadcasting. It is owned by brother Mike Velarde. It's for the El Shaddai Group. They have not gone on air for the longest time. Then next is Progressive Broadcasting, also known as UNTV. And then Channel 39, Masao Broadcasting, or Suarasug Broadcasting, being used by Sunshine now. And then Channel 41 is Nation Broadcasting. It's a network owned by TV5, or the parent company of TV5. Okay, they call it Action TV. I'm not sure. Okay. And then Channel 43 is Mareco Broadcasting, which is owned by Ankara Broadcasting now, which is being used by ABS-CBN for digital. That's why if you check the airwaves, you can still get digital programs of ABS-CBN on your digital receiver, like the TV Plus, even though there's a cease and desist order by the NTC for ABS-CBN. But that applies to VHF Channel 2. It's AM and FM. Okay, the franchise of ABS-CBN. Channel 43 is a different franchise. Okay, so it's a totally different discussion. Channel 45 is Gateway UHF. Channel 47 is ABC Development, owned by Ramon Coanco. So apparently when they sold TV5, which is the Associated Broadcasting Corporation, TV5, this Channel 47 is not included. Right? That's how it was explained to me. And then Channel 49 is GemNet, owned by Christian Era Broadcasting Services. And then Channel 51 is GB Broadcasting, which is being used by TV5 for their digital. Okay. Apparently, a few days ago, TV5 started using their nationwide digital channel allocation. I guess we'll discuss that as we go on. Okay, let's go on some history. So ABS-CBN is a product of a merger between Alto Broadcasting System and Chronicle Broadcasting. So the ABS part used to be owned by the Quirinos, related to the family of the late Elpidio Quirino. And then the CBN is owned by Eugenio Lopez Sr. Okay? So if we follow the rule of who was the first broadcaster in the Philippines, then technically ABS would be the first. Okay? Until their merger became. Okay? May mga dumaan lang mga siraulong na pumusok. So yun. They had a merger. So they eventually it was called ABS-CBN. So they started in 1953. Okay. And then we had the government station through the idea of during the Marcos time, they thought that the government should have their own TV network. Okay, so it has gone through a lot of transformation. At one time, it was called Maharlika Broadcasting System, MBS. Okay, and then it became People's Television, and then now People's Television Network Incorporated. And then for TV5 or ABC5 to be correct, founded by Mr. Joaquin Roses, who owns Manila Times also. Pero medyo huli na sila. You'll notice that they had a franchise in the 60s, but then their operation was a little bit later, 72 na siya, onwards. Okay? Because of the lack of profitability of broadcasting. Then, next is a GMA network. Technically, they're the second to operate broadcasting in the Philippines. It was owned by an American journalist before, named Mr. Bob Stewart. And then we had a law that no foreigner should have ownership of a public utility like broadcasting. So any public utility that deals with the lives, the everyday life of a Filipino should be owned by 100% by Filipino. Kasama yan sa franchise rule. So it applies also to water, electricity, telecommunications, anything that has to do with a congressional franchise. So yeah, in the 70s, it was acquired by three Filipinos, the Quezon, Duabit, and the Jimenez. So GMA used to be called Republic Broadcasting, and then the first meaning of GMA was Greater Manila Area because that's mainly their coverage until when they went nationwide, they call it Global Media Arts. RPN, founded by Mr. Benedicto. They are the first to go on colored TV broadcasting. Sila. And then ABS-CBN. Okay, yun yung milestone. So many of you don't know that RPN was the #1 station way back, I think in late 70s and then 80s. If you're interested in anime, then RPN is the channel for you. Okay. So they were #1 then. Then next is Live TV, which is Zoe Broadcasting, owned by Mr. Villanueva of Jesus is Lord. The initial idea, okay, this part of history, it was supposed to be a joint venture between Jesus is Lord and El Shaddai. But then, after they got the franchise from the government and they're about to operate the station, they had a dispute. Si Mr. Velarde at si Mr. Villanueva. And then, there was a court ruling and even Congress had to select who really owns the network. And it turns out that ownership was given to Brother Eddie Villanueva. So Brother Eddie Villanueva has to compensate the El Shaddai group for the losses. And then that's why they were given their own UHF allocation. And then IBC 13, they call it, used to be called Inter-Island Broadcasting. So they were the third to go colored. So sila lang yung mga major networks before. Okay, and then if we go to the UHF, ganito na sila karami. So we have the SBN, AMCARA. I'm doing it sequentially from left to right, top to bottom. So that's Southern Broadcasting, AMCARA Broadcasting, Eagle Broadcasting, Republic Broadcasting, Raja Broadcasting, Zoe Broadcasting, Delta Broadcasting, Progressive Broadcasting, Masao Broadcasting or Swarasu Broadcasting, and then Nation Broadcasting, Mareco Broadcasting, Gateway UHF has, I was not able to find any corporate logo. And then the Associated Broadcasting Corporation, Christian Era Broadcasting, Radio Mindanao Network, and GB Broadcasting. Okay, so I was trying to familiarize you with the franchise names. They have what they call on document, the legal reference for their existence is the franchise, but then for marketing purposes or identity, sometimes they use a different one. Okay. So progress of technologies in broadcasting. So before the advent of the internet, really terrestrial television is king. So whenever there's a major sporting event, that's the time to launch new technology. So that's every 4 years. So if we follow the milestone here, 1948 on the Olympics, just right after the war, they had the Olympics and it's a monochrome or black and white. And then the next leap, 1964 Tokyo Olympics, it was the first colored TV broadcast. Okay. And then the next leap is 20 years after Los Angeles Olympics. They already had high definition at that time. So you might be wondering, why high definition in 1984? The technology of high definition was developed by Mr. Kumada Junji. He had the patent. He developed the high definition technology in the late 70s. In fact, he was given the award by IEEE for his contribution and for the patent, the technology for high definition only 2 years ago. So luckily, he's still alive. So the technology exists back then, but the transmission media and the reception for us consumers is quite cost prohibitive. Okay, it's very expensive at that time. So it was restricted to broadcast, in-house broadcast. For post-production, editing, they usually do everything in high quality before they down convert to low quality transmission. I'll establish the meaning of high quality and then low quality later. Okay, so they were able to amass lots of material archived in high definition from 84. Okay, then the next leap, 4 years after is Seoul Olympics. So not much new technology, but in 2008 in the Beijing Olympics, it was the first global distribution of high definition broadcasting. Hindi lang malamig na tubig. High definition broadcasting. So that was the milestone in the Beijing Olympics. So imagine in 2008 was the year that we were treated for real high definition transmission, okay, despite that the technology was already available in the early 80s. Okay. Now the reason for that is that in 1998, digital broadcasting technologies for terrestrial delivery has been standardized, okay, in Europe and in North America, and then in Japan in 2003. So 2008, it's quite mature already for the early adopters or adoptees. And then in 2012, there had been an experimental SHB, or super high definition broadcasting. Okay, now the super high definition, or SHB, in Japan they call it super high vision. It was actually developed in the mid 2000. So can you see the difference here? Yung HD, they had it in the late 70s and early 80s, the technological development, but we were able to enjoy it and fully utilize it in the latter part of 2000. So let's say 2000, 2005 to 2010, okay? But super high definition is already a technology that has undergone development in Japan in the early 2000, and it was utilized in 2012. So that was like 12 years already that has passed. I've seen it personally during the development when I had my engineering research in NHK laboratory in Japan. So 2012 was the year that Japan was trying to host the Olympics to launch this new technology, but they lost to Beijing. So they tried again in Rio Olympics. Okay, they lost to Brazil. So, and then this 2020, which is this year, they got the slot, but unfortunately, we had this global pandemic. So they had to wait a little bit more before they can fully launch this technology. Okay, so they jumped from HD to super high vision or super high definition. Somewhere in the middle is the ultra high definition, or 4K. Oops. Why? Okay. So, okay, bear with me sa clicking process ko dito. Okay. So for analog stations, I used UHF as an example here. So each station has 6 megahertz that can deliver one program at a time. And if we look at the spectrum from channel 21 to 51 at the bottom of the slide, those in blue are active, duly enfranchised broadcasters, which means they have the franchise and they have the permit to operate that station. Those in red are taboo channels. So remember a while ago, I mentioned about FM that we are only able to use 25% of the total capacity. In TV band, in VHF and UHF, we are only able to use 50% because the adjacent channel is treated as a taboo channel to avoid interference. If you put 2 analog channels side by side, let's say channel 21, channel 22, it would create interference. So they created a gap, which is 6 megahertz wide. So this is one of those classic examples that justified the transition to digital. It's because of the lack of efficiency of the use of limited spectrum. Okay, if we go to digital, then effectively you double the number of potential broadcasters. Okay, that's the concept. Okay, so for the broadcast flow, so we classify the program sources, the processes, and the transmission. Since we're talking of analog broadcasting here, so the transmission part, we will use analog NTSC. And in 1.6 megahertz, you can only have one program. If you look back at the program source, you may have 1, 2, up to 10, or maybe 50 studios. But eventually, you will only choose one program out of all the studios that you have for transmission. And it's not only the studio. You also have outside broadcast services for production of entertainment, like telenovela, or whatever, drama, comedy, fictional, whatever. Those are considered as programs also, which is similar to the content being generated by a studio. Okay. The difference is that it's done outside of the studio. So we call it outside broadcast. And then another example is the electronic news gathering, or ENG. So some of you may have seen bands of ABS-CBN, PTV, GMA, TV5 with the pole somewhere in the truck. So that's the microwave link. So it's meant really for news feed, live news feed. Of course, you can use it for store and forward. You have a recorded material, let's say a news interview, and then you can forward through the link to the network for further scheduling of airing. Okay, so we call it electronic news gathering. Now, we have also yung satellite news gathering, SNG. It's basically the same as the electronic news gathering. The difference is that ENG most of the time uses microwave links as opposed to SNG that uses the satellite. Okay. Yeah, microwave links for fixed remote studios. So let's say you have a studio. If your transmission is in Quezon City, and let's say you have a studio somewhere in Antipolo or in Cubao, you can have live feed through the use of fixed microwave links. It's cheaper than satellite. Okay. And then you have streaming sources. So some people, they do news coverage using the phone. They have the microphone here, and then a lighting. And then some reporters do live news feed using their phones. So it has become simpler and easier to do remote broadcasting now by the use of telecommunication facilities and advanced compression techniques. So don't papasok yung MPEG. Wire services. Yung wire services, these are international news contribution that local broadcasters buy. Local broadcasters also sell their news contents to international audiences through the wire services also. Example are CNN, Associated Press, etc., etc. And then we have offline contents. These are advertisements on tape, on disc, or whatever media it was given to you. Okay, but each broadcast station has their preferred standard for the format of pre-recorded materials that they wanted to air. Okay, but conventionally it's a tape. Okay. So for the process, so what I've mentioned in the program sources is not limited to what I have highlighted here. I was just giving you some examples, okay, because we would run out of space if I would list all of them. For the processes, I've listed some of the usual ones. So for it includes routing, the program selection, quality control. For the automation, you can schedule everything on the timeline, which one goes. So it can be plucked from the server or live from a studio, etc., etc. Okay, that includes also the editing facilities, the insertion of graphics, special effects, scrollers, logos, etc. Until you reach transmissions. Basically, it's the master control that selects the final program that will be passed on to the transmission for airing. So after all of the processes you have gone through, the master control would only choose one for your analog transmission. Okay. Now from the program sources at our stage now, almost all of them are acquired through digital means in high definition. However, since we're still in analog, so sa transmission, you have to down convert your digital content, the highest quality possible, to the standard that would conform to the analog. And if we're talking of high definition, going to the resolution of our analog now, it's 1/4 the resolution. So imagine you've invested millions of dollars for high quality acquisition materials, post-production, etc. When it comes to the final delivery in analog, you have to down convert it. So that's one of the bad side of using a technology that is 70 years old, at least 70, okay, because it was developed in the 50s, kasi 53. So we're already 2020. So that's how old the transmission standard that we're using in analog. If we go to digital, okay, as I mentioned, most of the facilities in the broadcast are already digital. The difference would be the inclusion of a head-end, which is composed of encoders, okay, and a multiplexer that conforms to Arrive standard B31. Okay, that would allow you to go digital. So you will notice on the transmission program here, we have the option to go high definition or standard definition and multiple programs. So you're not limited to one program as opposed to analog. Okay. So ABS-CBN is doing this, PTV, TB5, GMA, except GEMNet. They're the ones using full high definition only, while the rest are using a combination of standard definition program. Okay. So we all know the quality of high definition. Bagal. Switch. Mouse. Okay. So here, I have the RF analog digital channel allocation example for NCR. Okay. On your left side indicates yung upper left side, the existing VHF operators. And by the memorandum circular of the NTC, all of these VHF operators are entitled to a simulcast digital channel in the UHF band. The reason being is that for a certain period of time, they all have to terminate their analog broadcasting in the VHF and surrender the frequency to the government. By DICT's migration plan, that's on 2023. So in theory, there should be no more analog broadcasting by 2023. That's why the UHF simulcast channels been given to the 7 VHF operators now to slowly migrate to digital. And this would be the order of assignment. So PTV got channel 14, GMA got 15, ABS-CBN got 16, IBC got 17, TV5 got 18, RPN got 19, and Zoe got 20. Okay, of all of these networks, ABS-CBN for a time operated in advance their channel 16. But since it's under the ABS-CBN franchise and they have the cease and desist order, so they have to terminate. GMA has yet to use their channel 15. IBC also. However, TB5 a few days ago started using their channel 18. RPN and Zoe has not yet utilized this channel allocation. And then if you go to the right portion, those in blue are the ones using digital now on that channel. So we disregard the microwave thing that's overlapped on the image. So there's a need to fix the current channel use. You'll notice IBC is using channel 26 at the moment, wherein they can use their allocation in the nationwide channel list, which is from channel 40 to 20. Okay. The reason why it's classified as a nationwide channel, nationwide digital channel, nobody else uses these frequencies in the country. So it's an advantage for the 7 VHF operators to go to digital. They are essentially guaranteed a digital channel for nationwide deployment. Okay. So this one highlights the channel potential for each broadcaster. UHF as an example again. So each 6 megahertz has the option to go multiple programs. Okay. And those in white are digital at the moment. Those in blue are still analog, and those in red are still classified as taboo channels. Notice the taboo channel has been reduced. So this shows you that once we go to digital, we will achieve a virtual 100% utilization of the limited spectrum. That's the advantage, okay? Plus, of course, the government will earn for the use of those taboo channels because it's a new operator. Thereby, they are required to render payment for the use of the spectrum, for regulation, etc., etc. Okay. Example of a studio setup. So in a studio, you have cameras, you have VTRs or playback machines, you have servers for some pre-recorded plugs, advertisements, etc. And you may have other sources external to the studio. All of this program acquisition is connected to a video mixer in parallel with the audio mixer. We call it the audio follow, so that the video and the audio will be synchronized. You maintain lip sync also. So the video mixer or the switcher will select from the various sources which one is selected for delivery to the next stage. So for how many numbers of video sources that you have, that's the number of monitors that you have. So for the monitoring, if I have 4 cameras, 3 VTRs, and 1 video server here, so that's equivalent to 8 sources. You have 8 monitors, so you can see in real time ano yung laman ng 8 sources mo. And then once you select, that becomes a program. The PVW means preview, which means it's on standby, might be selected, might not be, but usually the preview is next to program when you're trying to select. Okay, so this is an example of a studio setup. It's very simple. If you look at OB, ENG, SNG, is the outside broadcast, electronic news gathering, satellite broadcasting. It's very similar to your studio. The difference is that they have less number of cameras and program sources. The reason being is because of the space limitation. Okay, so you may have a big truck, but then the production staff, they still need to go inside. So that's why you limit the number of cameras and program sources for outside broadcasting. Okay, but the functions is essentially the same. Okay, so the content of the studio will be fed to the technical operations center. The same is true with the OB, ENG, and SNG. Okay. Next is the master control. Okay. So the master control will get all the feed from Studio 1, let's say up to 10, and then you have microwave links, satellite links, different video servers, different remote news bands. All of them will be treated as sources. So in essence, a master control becomes a studio, but you treat the program source as studios, ENG, OB-band, ENG, etc., etc. It's virtually, the setup is virtually like a studio. In the sense that a studio, the program source is a camera, a PDR, and a server. When you go to the master control, the studio become the input, the OB-band, the ENG, etc. So you follow me. So it is like when you design the whole baseband system of a broadcasting station, it's like a cascaded studio. Okay, the studio becomes an input to the master control. So I'm trying to give you an idea to visualize the setup. But when it comes to the actual design and setup, it requires a lot of knowledge and experience also, because there are certain standards, some techniques that needs to be followed to ensure seamless transitions and interconnections of different facilities. For the transmission, okay, after the master control has selected which one will be used for on-air operation, okay, they feed it to your transmission. So I have here two examples. The one on top would be the link. You may have utilized a coaxial link, a fiber link, a microwave link, we call it the studio to transmitter link, or a satellite link if the distance is substantial or great. Okay? So whatever is the output of the master control, it will be passed on to a link to allow delivery of the selected program for airing from the master control, the head office, to the transmitter side. Okay? Because some stations have their transmission off-site. Okay? To give you an example, PTV has their transmission inside their facility. The same is true with ABS-CBN. GMA has it off-site. So they have their transmission in EDSA Corner Timog Avenue, and their transmitter is in Tandansora. Okay. Now, RPN also is an example of a remote transmitter. It's in Panay Avenue, and I think their studios is in Mandaluyong. Okay. The same is true with Zoe Broadcasting. Their studio is in Ortigas. Their transmitter is in Antipolo. Okay. I may have missed other stations, okay, but do call my attention if you want to know more. Now, to distinguish to digital, you have the link, and then you have to remultiplex before you feed to the modulator. Okay, unlike in analog, the one on top, simply from the link, you get the video, analog video, and audio output, feed it to the modulator, and then transmit. Now, if it's for digital transmission, I assume that the head end, which I showed earlier, the one that contains the encoders and the multiplexer, is in the master control or in the TOC, somewhere in the head office. Okay? So when they transmit through microwave, through fiber, or satellite, the receiving end in the transmitter side will have to obtain the transport stream. We call it the transport stream. Now, the transport stream is based on a 188-byte configuration. So the ISD-BTV requires 204 bytes. So that's why we have the remux or remultiplexer. Basically, you are trying to remultiplex a 188-byte multiplexed signal to make it 204. And then that 204 byte will be fed to the modulator. Okay? So it's a single link Unlike doon sa analog, you have separate video and audio links. Connection. And then from the modulator, we go to transmit. Okay? You follow, guys? Are we doing okay so far? Can you hear me? Can you see me? Okay. Yan. Happy na nasusundan nyo. Okay? So the difference between analog and digital. The baseband system. So on the left would be your analog setup. On the right is your digital setup. Notice in the analog setup, I have made two boxes with dashed lines because those are absent in digital. So when we go to the right side, the digital setup, notice those in dashed lines are the added facility for the head end and the added output capability in digital. And then the rest would be virtually the same. So this makes it very easy actually for broadcasters to go to digital. It's very easy because they can still utilize what they have now. They just have to add several equipment to meet the requirements of transmitting digital. So they're not starting from scratch. In fact, they can go parallel broadcasting, analog and digital at the same time. Okay, so for me, there's no reason to stay in analog for the longest time. It's so easy. Well, I almost said something, pero paano ba? Basta, it's not that difficult to set up a digital system. If we follow the laws in the Philippines, like the customs, DOF, Department of Finance, I think DTI, KBP, and the other agencies that needs to comply with, I guess the fastest to deploy a digital system from scratch is less than 1 year. If it's me who's going to make the design, it's going to be less than a year and you're up and running from scratch. But if you have some facilities already, like if you're an existing broadcaster, then maybe if you're passionate enough, 4 months, then you're okay. Okay. So since I assume there are people from the DICT listening or some agencies in government that has some particular interest on this one, it could give them an idea how to push the broadcasters so that eventually we can enjoy 100% spectral utilization and the introduction of digital programs for our people. Okay, location of the TV stations. Okay, so you'll notice here that they're pretty much scattered. Okay, instead of just concentrating on one location, the idea sana is to have a single tower to host all transmission. But then there are business interests and differences among networks that prevents that from happening. A single broadcast origin for all stations. So it might take a law or a strong government policy to require all broadcasters to do that, but then that's a totally different exercise. The benefit of having a single transmission location is that it's more cost effective because there's only one tower, so they can all share the cost of the tower. And like now, they have to build their own. So you're repeating the cost for every network. The same is true for the antenna system. They can share the same antenna for all broadcasters. And now they're building their own. Okay? And even for the technical personnel who will operate and maintain, they only have one team. For reception, it's more advantageous for the people because you only have to orient your receiving antenna into one location. If we assume the broadcast tower, the common tower is installed in Quezon City, let's say in the circle, Quezon City circle. So all the people will just point their antennas to QC circle and you receive all of them. Unlike now, if you look at the screen, if you prefer, let's say you're from, okay, I'll put you in Visayas Avenue. Let's say you live somewhere only in the project area, maybe project 4. If you like to watch GMA and ABS-CBN, then the GMA transmission is in Tandansora, and then ABS-CBN is somewhere in Quezon Ave. So you may have to pan your antenna to ensure that you get good signal for both. Okay. Now, if you watch ABS-CBN but you want to watch TV5 also digital, then you have more problems, because to get ABS-CBN you have to point your antenna to Quezon Ave. However, you want to watch TV5 digital is in Antipolo. So that's about 90 degrees or more, maybe 110 degrees difference to the antenna orientation. So essentially what I'm trying to say is that because of the varied location of the transmitter stations of the broadcasters, there's less chance for you to get all transmission using a single antenna. Okay, that's the problem. Okay, this is an example. I did an episode on this one. It's up on my YouTube channel. Comparison of reception using different types of antenna on different configuration, vertical and horizontal polarization. Notice that some networks have better signal level reception using horizontal or vertical or vice versa. So in this example, you look at yung stock TV plus stock antenna, which is the magnetic antenna. It is more successful or has better reception capability using vertical polarization than horizontal polarization. And notice, that's for ABS-CBN, the blue one. If we go for the gray one, which is GMA, notice that reception is better if it's horizontal polarization. If we look at channel 43, which is ABS-CBN again, here, vertical is better. And then for TV5, horizontal is better. Okay, this is one of those things that's been dictated by the engineering, how do you say this? The choice of the engineers. Of course, they have basis on why choosing either horizontal or vertical. But traditionally, broadcast TV has been horizontal polarization. Now, in digital, ABS-CBN chose vertical polarization. That's why when you use the TV plus antenna, so it's magnet type. So it's standing like this. So that's vertical because that is the polarization, the antenna polarization of their transmission. It is best if the receiving antenna is also vertical, thereby reducing the reception capability of those networks in the horizontal polarization. This is a strategy. Okay? So sana you get the concept already. Now, for those households who use the conventional antenna, let's get an example. Okay. So most of the rooftop antennas are like this, horizontal polarization. Now, when you go vertical polarization like the one being done by ABS-CBN, Maximum reception is done if the antenna is oriented like this. Okay, so that's the difference. So in this slide that I've shown you, which is based on my experiment done at home, using, of course, several test equipment, you are able to identify the strengths and weaknesses of each antenna on certain configuration like polarization, among others. I chose them, channel 16 of ABS-CBN, channel 27 GMA, channel 43 ABS-CBN, and channel 21 TB5 because they're the major ones. Okay, plus of course to shorten my experimentation because the purpose was to identify which antenna has higher reception capability. Okay, so if you're gonna purchase certain antennas, this would be some relevant data for you to use. Okay, so we know that the electromagnetic energies consist of the electric field and the magnetic field, and they're always perpendicular to one another. So the one that dictates the polarization of an antenna is the direction of the electric field. So which means, if it's like this, then the direction of the electric field is here or here. And then the magnetic field is like this. Okay, they're perpendicular. If I go like this, electric field goes here, and then goes here, and then the magnetic field goes here. Okay, so it's very easy. So here I have an example of Yossi muna habang nagde-lecture. Types of antenna polarization. You have the horizontal, which is like this, the vertical, and then the circular polarization. The circular polarization simply is a simultaneous use of horizontal and vertical polarization. Okay. Now the illustration, those in lines in a box, is typical of the antenna configuration in the panels that you see. Let's like in the telco industry, the rectangular antennas, mga ganang example. If you open it, what you see is something like this. Okay, so I have here antenna patterns. There are actually two types of antenna pattern: the vertical radiation pattern and the horizontal radiation pattern. Now, we have been taught in school that the pattern is based on the horizontal radiation only, which is the one you see on the right. So if it's cardioid, ellipse, or an omnidirectional. However, there's another pattern, which is the vertical radiation pattern, which dictates the required null field for those areas that are very close to the transmitters. So it's not very good actually if you're beside the power itself, the transmitting power, because you're at the null, very close. So there are strategies that you can employ to apply null fill. Means those very close will be covered. Okay. I'll take a pause for a while. I'll go to the restroom. Mr. Moderator, please take charge muna. Naglit lang.
Okay, sir. So everybody is enjoying the seminar. Nice. For the questions po pala, bali, i-entertain na lang ni Sir James after the presentation. So, i-compile na lang po natin through the chat box. Okay, guys? If needed po pala ng CR break din po yung iba, you can go para tuloy-tuloy po tayo mamaya. And don't forget to like our page and follow our official Facebook page, IECEP QCSC Official. And if you have any inquiries regarding our organization, please email us at icepqcsc at isep.uc.org. Thank you guys. And after the presentation, we will send the link for the post survey for the claiming of the e-certificates. The certificates will be sent to your Gmail account that used during your registration. Thank you po.
Okay, I'm back. Okay. To follow on the vertical radiation pattern, notice here, I have 3 lines, green, blue, and red. Okay. Have you noticed on top of the tower that they have multiple antennas? This is true for all broadcasters. We call it antenna stacking, or putting the antenna on top of each other in the same direction or in any desired direction. So in the Philippines, the configuration is always reference to north, east, west, south. But of course, you can deviate. But that's how we do it. You have antennas going on the northern, eastern, southern, and then the western. Okay. For NCR, there's a slight skew because if you look at the topography of Luzon, there's these big mountains, antipolo side. So if you go north, you're wasting electromagnetic energy. So you skew a little bit counterclockwise so that your signal can propagate greater distances towards central Luzon. Now on the south, there's nothing you can do because of the mountains in Tagaytay that automatically blocks the signal from being propagated further. Okay, I hope you can imagine. So if you do not stack antennas, like I think let's say two antenna stacking only, you get the red line. Okay, so the angle of depression at the 8.5 degree, so kindly look at the graph. Yung red at 8.5 degree, that's your first null point, which is equivalent to about 15% of the total energy being radiated. And then the next null point is around 15 degrees, which is at 5% of the total energy being radiated, which means the first and the second null point will be the areas with the weakest signal. So if you're on top of the tower and you can put an angle of depression like that, at 8.5 degree, whatever is that location would be the weakest. Gets? Okay tayo? So if you stack antennas on top of each other, we go to the blue one. Let's say this is a 4 antenna stack. 1, 2, 3, 4 in one direction. Okay, the angle of depression is around at 4.1 degrees. Would be your 15 degrees of 15% of your energy radiated. That's your first null point. Your second null point will be at 11 degrees. And then if you have 8 panels stacked on top of each other, the green line, the first null point is at 5 degrees. And the next null point is at 8.5, and then the third would be at 11.8. Okay, so there is a benefit of stacking antennas on top of each other. Okay, types of transmission line. We only use 2 types: the flexible foam type and the air dielectric. Okay, so when we say air dielectric, as a substitute to the foam, we use air as the resistive portion. between the two conductors. Okay, so usually the flexible ones are used for low power. However, uh, there are high power transmission lines like the 6-inch 6 and 1/8, which is about the size of an anaconda, siguro, about this size. That's a 6-inch cable. So imagine you put that on the tower, length of maybe 250 meters, how heavy it is. It's still classified as flexible, but I doubt you can bend it because it's at that size, at that dimension, it's really rigid already. But it's not considered as a rigid line. Okay, the RF switch. There are two types of RF switch. So we have the manual, which is the one on your right. Basically, you plug the U ring. It's letter U, diba? You remove that. Right now, it's on the vertical position. So you remove, and then you switch on the horizontal. So that's how you do the switch. But of course, you have to turn off the transmitter first. Okay. The one on your left is the one for automatic RF switching. It's safer, it's faster. Okay. But then it's more expensive also. This is part of the antenna system. Okay. So how do you mount antennas to the tower? Okay, this is one of those challenging moments as a broadcast engineer, especially after designing, then you go to the implementation. You have the option to climb the tower if you want. Okay, but of course, it adds to your prestige as a broadcast engineer that you were able to climb the tower. Okay, the highest that I've been in the Philippines is 400 feet. Okay, I cannot go further. Okay, so some, okay, two types of mounting is yung using pulleys. So the one on the left, top left, you have a pulley. So the antenna system is configured from the ground, and then you pull it up until it reaches the top. Okay, and then we go to the center. So you have to align it manually. In the alignment process, you have someone there to guide the people. And then you have to secure it. Okay? So there's no choice. There is somebody who has to go up. Okay? But usually these are done by professionals in the antenna industry. Okay? And of course, some of the engineers are required to do the actual inspection. So you can see that on the right portion. And then the other alternative in mounting the antenna is using airlifting helicopter. It's expensive and it's dangerous. The pilot has the authority to drop the antenna if he feels that it's dangerous. Let's say a strong wind is coming and it's dangerous for the aircraft. He would drop the antenna. Of course, sasabihan niya yung nasa baba. Okay, so this is an example. The tower of ABS, CBN, and their antenna system. So we go from the left going to the right. Okay, so the leftmost picture shows you the tower itself and the antennas mounted on it. This is the reinforced ABS, CBN tower. If we magnify, the next picture shows that there are so many dipole-like elements mounted. Okay, and then on top, there are panel antennas, similar to what you see in telecommunications. Okay, so this gives you the one on top, the panel antennas, is for their digital transmission. And then below that, the multiple dipole-looking antennas are for their channel 2 low band nature. Okay, and then going to the next picture, we magnify, you'll see an orange pole, which is for their UHF. This is what we call a slotted antenna. So it's tuned to channel 23. And then going to the rightmost, which would be the magnified panel antennas for their digital. So that's the sequence. So you have at the lowest portion, the, I forgot, I mentioned it already, the type of antenna. And then that's the lowest for their channel 23. And then we go for the VHF. How can I forget the name? I just mentioned it. And then on top would be their digital. Can you remind me, the guys? I just mentioned it. Wow. This is RPN Tower in Panay Avenue. So you see a lot of dipoles, okay? And that's basically it. This is their channel 9 analog transmitting power. Their digital is in antipolo. So it's not on the same power. Unlike in ABS-CBN, they have their analog UHF, channel 2, and then their digital in one tower. So if you look at the tower of ABS-CBN now, they have, I think, 8 panels stacked, 8 antennas stacked on top of each other for 4 directions. So that's where they transmit their channel 16 and channel 43. Okay. This is TB5. Okay. Notice in TB5, they have on top a circularly polarized antenna for their FM broadcasting. So that's, I think, 106.7. And then below the FM, the one on top, is their analog channel 5. Okay? And that antenna is very similar with the one used in ABS-CBN. And then notice below the channel 5 is the same type of antenna, which I mentioned earlier, and then I forgot what it's called. Wow. Anyway, that's for their UHF. Okay, but it's not being used anymore. Okay. By coincidence, the similarities of the transmitting antennas of TB5 and ABS-CBN is due to the fact that the former head of engineering of ABS-CBN became the head of engineering of TB5. Okay. Okay. When doing coverage studies, it's not only based on the design desire of the broadcaster. You have to take into consideration also the reception side. Okay, this is one common failure in the consideration. You just design something based on what you want, but not based on reality on if the people are going to receive it. These two coverage study example that I've shown you has something to do with reception. It depends if the receiving antenna is at 10 meter or at 2 meter. So in digital, there's a requirement by standard that you should design it at 10 meter, meaning the higher the position of your receiving antenna, the higher probability that you will receive the signal. I think at 99.9% of the time. Okay. Now, if you lower down the antenna 2 meter with respect to the ground, then naturally the signal, received signal will go down. Okay. And then there are people who put their antenna inside the house. So imagine how much signal reduction. And then people will complain that they cannot receive the service because the antenna is inside the house. And if it's inside, you have to achieve greater signal from the outside for it to get in. Okay. In principle, the antenna should be outside. Right? It's like a flashlight. There's no point in hiding the flashlight. If you want to use it, it should be in the open. Okay. Anyway, so same transmission parameters, same transmission ERP, but when it comes to the receiver of the people, if it's at the lower location, notice signal degrades. Okay, so the right image shows you green would be the best and red would be the worst. And then if you go to the left, lower antenna elevation results into weaker reception. Okay, countries that have adopted digital standards, we are on the pink, that is ISDBT. Switch. Okay, switch na. So these are the standards for compression. So lumamig na yung pizza ko. Langgam na. Hindi sa mga langgam. Galing sa mga to. Na. So we have here ITU and the ISO IEC standard for the compression. You have the MPEG-1, MPEG-2, MPEG-4, and H.265. So if you have particular interest on the different compression techniques, please download those standards. Okay. It will help you greatly if you go to industries like broadcasting, cable television, direct home satellite, satellite engineering, and even telecommunications now. Okay. Okay. Picture format and resolution comparison. Okay. A screen is divided into two. The number of lines on the horizontal, which defines the resolution, and then on the horizontal defines how many pixels in one line. So if you increase the number of lines and increase the number of pixels per line, you have a high resolution image, a display, or a camera. Basically, a camera sensor and a display is essentially the same, except that a camera sensor is to capture light, a display is to generate the light on the pixels. Okay. Now here, 1 seg resolution. If you have a digital TV receiver, I'm sure you've noticed there's this 1 seg channel there. So it was meant for portable reception or small screens if you want to watch TVs. That was part of the concept in 2003. Okay, because the technology then, the chipset, would require huge amounts of power to be able to continue its operation, and the decoding, the computing power also for the decoding is quite substantial. But now you can have full seg reception on portable receivers, like this one. I bought this tablet. It's a low-cost tablet from my phone, but I don't use it really as a smart device. I use it as a digital TV tuner if I want to watch some UAAP games. So especially if I'm not at home, traveling somewhere. So I watch the UAAP games here. Okay, that's it. That's the only reason why I bought this, no more. So if there's no games, it goes to the storage. But that's the yellow box. So what's the resolution for our analog and the standard definition resolution being transmitted by the broadcasters? So when I say standard definition, that includes the resolution output of ABS-CBN and GMA in digital, and that is the red box. Now, if we're talking of high definition, that is the dashed black line. That's the resolution of high definition. In some countries, like Japan, Korea, some European countries, they're already on 4K. Okay, yung 4K would be the green area on the black solid line. So imagine the difference. We are still on the red box. There's only one broadcaster in the Philippines using high definition on the black dashed line. And then the other countries, the advanced countries, are already on the green space, which is 4K. And then the super high definition or super high vision of Japan is the violet area, the biggest square. So that's how we compare to the other countries in the world in digital. We are still on the red box resolution. So at least sana, di ba? At least we go for high definition. And that's what I've been pushing for the longest time. So since 2009, GemNet has maintained high definition broadcasting. Okay. So features of ISDBT, the digital TV standard of the Philippines. So it is based on band segmented transmission, orthogonal frequency division multiplexing, or BST OFDM. So basically, the 6 megahertz is divided into segments. So 6 megahertz, you have the orange rectangles on both sides. It's equivalent to 200 kilohertz each, so that's 400 kilohertz total of guard band. Thereby, you only have 5.6 megahertz of usable capacity. Okay, that's where you put your standard definition or high definition program, in addition to the red one, which is exclusive for one-set broadcasting. So the maximum throughput of an ISDBT transmission is 23.23 megabits per second. So at that full capacity, I can have maybe 3 high definition, okay, or maybe 2 high definition and then 3 standard definition. So it depends on the parameters that you will use for the configuration, and also the business model of the TV network. So essential parameters. So choose the bandwidth capability. So in the Philippines, it's 6 megahertz. And then the code rate, or the FEC. We call it FEC in school, diba? Forward error correction. So you have 1/2, 2/3, 3/4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1/2 means in every bit that you transmit, there's 1 parity or 1 error correction code. This will provide you with the highest robustness of the coding scheme because it's virtually a full redundancy, diba? Next is 2/3. Every 2 bits, you have 1 parity information. And then we go further, 7 bits, 1 parity information. Therefore, from this, we know that 7/8 of FEC or code rate would give you the highest data rate capacity, but least amount of robustness from errors, okay? 1/2 would be the highest, but the lowest bit rate. Next, ayun, meron pa akong illustration example pala sa baba. For the guard interval, okay, this is used as a reference to synchronize different transmitters using the same frequency in the same service area, or we call it single frequency network. So this is one of the features of digital broadcasting, that you can have multiple transmitters to cover null points, null areas, or areas that has weak or no signal. behind the building or behind the mountain, you can put another transmitter using the same frequency. In the analog days, if you have a shadow area or null point, you cannot do anything about it. You cannot put another transmitter because it would create interference, okay, at the same frequency. So the guard interval tells you how far will be the distance for the next location of the transmitter. If you utilize 1/4 guard interval, that's 252 microseconds away, or around 75.6 kilometers away. So that's from Metro Manila, let's say from Quezon City up to maybe Angeles, Pampanga, siguro, mga ganong distansya, or a little bit further. So you have a big distance to put the SFN. Okay. Now, of course, if you use 1/4, then it will eat up a portion of your channel capacity. Okay. So 1/8 is 1/2 of 1/4. It's 126 microseconds away. So the next location of your transmitter in the SFN should be within 37.8 kilometers. You cannot exceed that. If you exceed that, it would create interference. But of course, there are techniques, engineering techniques that allows you to manage the synchronization if you go beyond that. But it's not part of the discussion. Okay? And then 116, 63 microseconds, which is 18.9 kilometers away, and then 132. Of all the guard intervals here, 1/4 would eat up most of the capacity. So you will not be able to attain the 23.23 megabits per second. Okay? So you can achieve that if you go on 132 guard interval, which means if you deploy an SFN, you have transmitters in close proximity, barely 10 kilometers away. So you have to strike a balance. This is part of the design characteristic or criteria. Okay. This is the example on the right. I have here example of where to put the tower. You have to manage the distance. Okay. And then the illustration of the guard interval, 1/4 eats up the channel capacity, 132 gives you more channel capacity. And then to avoid further computation for the rate calculation, okay, I have here a table derived from the Arrive standard B31. You can download the standard at dibeg.org or dibeg.org. The standard again is Arrive STD-B31. Okay? The B24 is for data broadcasting, the 25, etc., etc. But go for B31. So I have here a table. So if you use 64 QAM, the modulation, 3/4 code rate, or the FEC, plus let's say 1/4 guard interval, my maximum data rate is 16.4 megabits per second. So it's easy to follow. So if you want to achieve the 23.23 megabits per second, your parameter should be 64 QAM, 7/8 code rate, and 132 guard interval. Okay? Gets? Very easy, di ba? Diyan pa ba kayo? Bored na ba? If we go for digital, we will have 100% utilization of the spectrum. More broadcasters, more program choice for the people, greater income for the government, for the licensing, and regulatory fees. So tayo magbe-benepisyo lahat. The more broadcasters competing with one another, better content, better service to the people. So let's go digital. Let's push. Let's spread the news that digital would be best for everybody. So this is the example, the different configurations that can be utilized. So option one, they can go full multiple high definition. Option number two, they can have a mix of high definition and standard definition. Or option three, which is what most broadcasters are doing now, multiple standard definition only. At least let's go for option two. Let's push the broadcasters to introduce even one HD content, a certain time slot man lang, diba? 5,000 watt transmitter. Let's assume that the antenna gain is the same, okay? So for ERP calculation. So notice for the 25 kilowatt analog transmitter, single transmitter, you have weak areas indicated by the red in close proximity to the transmitter origin. If I go digital, I employ three 1,000 watt or 1 kilowatt in SFN from the parameters a while ago that we've discussed. Notice that actually the three 1,000 watt or three 1 kilowatt in SFN has better coverage than a single 25,000 watt. And then if I increase the number of transmitter, I make it into 4 1 kilowatt. I have red, the weak areas in the middle, which is a byproduct of reflected energy that resulted into a self-interference. So sometimes it's bad if you have too many transmitter or the power is too high. So in digital, very strong signal will result into failure of reception. In analog, weak signal, failure of reception. In digital, if the signal is too strong, you will not get decoding. If it's very weak, you will not get decoding. So which means you only need sufficient amount of signal. Okay? So that's how you play with the parameters. So in effect, in this illustration, it shows you that in terms of energy requirement, digital is more environmental friendly. It serves the areas that you need to provide signal, therefore more people will be able to get your program, your transmission. Okay? So this is where the skill of the design engineer will come into play. It may be an engineer or group of engineers working together as a team. And most of the time, TV stations hire a consultant to do this kind of things. Okay? And that's what I do. I do consultancy. Okay, we go to data broadcasting. We call it BML or broadcast markup language. Basically, it's XHTML. The difference with regular HTML is that HTML you need to refresh to get the new data. XHTML automatically updates if there's new data. So it's stored in the memory of your receiver. What are the examples of data broadcasting? In the Philippines, these are the examples. The one on top, if you have TV Plus, you press, I think, the yellow button on the remote control, you will gain access to some of the special data being introduced by ABS-CBN. It can be special news, showbiz information, special announcement, maybe, in this case, recipe, or program information, scheduling. Yeah. The one at the bottom is an example of PTV datacast. So at the moment, there's two networks who has the datacast service, ABS-CBN and the government station, PTV. So other layouts, so you can have the data overlaid on the screen, and then the video is minimized. So you don't have any graphics that is covering the video layer. You can still see the full video while accessing some of the data information. This is an example in Japan. If you want to access the morning weather situation, so you can decide on your own if you should bring an umbrella or a raincoat, etc. If you're watching a sports program and you want to see live scores, uh, athlete statistics, other relevant information, the data cache should be able to provide those details for you. And during the trial in the Philippines, we had several shake drills already. And ABS-CBN has been cooperative in transmitting the advisories for the emergency warning broadcasting system. So, of course, this is an example. It's a drill. So it informs the people where to seek shelter or assistance whenever in need. So they define the regions. They have the west, northeast, south. Okay. So which one is closest to you? That's where you go if you need help. Of course, we're continuously doing trials to familiarize ourselves. I've been clamoring for the full utilization of EWBS or Emergency Warning Broadcasting System in the Philippines since even before Ondoy. Tagal na. So we had several typhoons already. We had Taal, and now the COVID thing. This is the fastest way to deliver near real-time information to people. Unlike the one you get from your phone, the SMS warning from NDRMMC, usually it has happened a few hours already before you receive it. So it's like useless. You need the warning at least if it's not before the actual occurrence, at least a few minutes before, di ba? At least you can prepare. If it's a tsunami, di ba, and you get the warning 3 hours after, then probably you're dead already, di ba? That's why we call it warning. It should be before. Okay. Anyway, so we have a configuration like this. So the system has already been deployed in PTV, People's Television Network. So they have the facility for emergency warning system. The lead agency who has to exert effort to interconnect all the relevant agencies here is the Department of Information Communication Technology. They'll be the ones to provide the physical facility for PAGASA and all of its sensors to get the warning information based on detection, to process it, to forward it to the Office of Civil Defense, okay, and then route it back to the National Disaster Risk Reduction Management Council. It has been decided that the final authorization to issue the warning is NDRMMC. So once NDRMMC, based on data from PAGASA, PhilBox, MMDA, and other agencies, and they treat it as a warning relevant for immediate dissemination, they issue the warning, and then it will be routed to the DICT facility, and then from the DICT, all broadcasters are connected. So that warning will be filtered to all of them immediately, and then the broadcasters will just transmit automatically. There are two modes of transmission. Once emergency data is received, it automatically transmits without disrupting the normal program of the TV. There will be a warning information flashing in front of your screen. Okay, so that's the challenge. So DICT has taken the responsibility for that. It's just a matter of the broadcasters being able to meet also the efforts of the DICT to realize emergency warning broadcasting system. As far as the regulation is concerned, the NTC has already issued that the EWBS is an essential component of ISDBT, the Digital Broadcasting Standard, for the Philippines use. So we even published internationally the relevant codes. So you can warn per region or per city in Metro Manila. So you don't issue one warning for the whole country, diba? Let's say there's an earthquake in Batanes. You don't alert the people in Mindanao because they will not be affected. So to manage the type of warning being issued, it can be regional, it can be per city. In Metro Manila, it's per city. For example, there will be massive flooding. So you issue warning on Navotas, Manila, Malabon, parts of Cavite, what else? Maybe Pasay, portion of Pasay. You don't warn the people in Quezon City. Okay? Because if there's flooding in Quezon City due to sea level rise, then Malabon, Navotas, Valenzuela, Manila, Pasay will be gone. Diba? So to manage the reaction of the people. So I have here listed the codes for each city. And we even have the international EWBS code for all ISDBT country. Okay, so if you want to obtain the different codes for region 1, 2, 3, 4, CAR, ARMM, etc., etc., I think you can obtain a copy from the NTC. I have a copy, but I don't know where I put it. I actually prepared this one, the code, but I don't know where I put my master file. Next. Okay. So in this example, the typhoon from the Pacific usually hits eastern Visayas and the Bicol region first. So they should be the first one to get the warning. Okay. It's quite unfortunate that they're literally the punching bag of the typhoon. Yung areas na to. So the beauty of a typhoon is that we can detect its presence a few days before it actually hits the land. The relevance of using emergency on the changes in the strength of the typhoon. So you don't have to wait for the regular newscast because a newscast is periodic. It can happen maybe every hour or every 6 hours, every 8 hours. So sometimes you need the information head on to make the proper decision. This is an image of the facility of PTV. So there's a picture here with the cover, the blue one, that's the digital transmitter. The white cabinets are the analog. So you see the digital has less footprint in a certain space. It consumes less space. So for your respective schools, if you want to visit a facility with the digital transmission, I recommend to go to PTV because it's owned by the government. So every citizen has access. But of course, you have to formalize your request for the visit. And if you need someone to explain, you can ask me. I'll join. Okay, pioneers of digital ISDBT in the Philippines. So this is the real thing. Who's number one? Who's the first one? So the first one is GEMNet, or Christian Era Broadcasting. Next is the government station, People's Television Network Inc. third is ABS-CBN, and then fourth is TB5. They are the early adoptees of the ISDBT standard. They introduced it to their transmission ahead of the rest. Okay. This is the Digital TV Summit, February 14, signaling it's a ceremony signaling the switch from analog to digital broadcasting. It kind of formalizes the Philippines as a nation, our program to shift to full digital broadcasting. So I think you can download from the DICT website the migration plan, which stipulates 2023 as the analog shutdown. So be prepared. And as future engineers, it's also incumbent upon you to educate other people that we are in a transition and we need to prepare. If you can shift to digital now, get your digital TV receiver and enjoy better TV services than the one we have been used to in the analog. It would make it easier for the broadcasters also to terminate their analog broadcast system. Okay, so in the image, you'll see there Secretary Salalima, the top right image, and the representatives from GMA, ABS-CBN, PTV, who else? The Philippine Appliance Association, the NTC, and I think representative from the Japanese government. So the major networks are well represented. And then at the bottom right would be the DICT team that worked so hard for this event that they chose February 14. Of all the dates, February 14 to have such a summit. Yay! Okay. So I'd like to thank my supporters, Ryu Ramen. So please do visit their restaurant. I guarantee you guys, the ramen and Japanese food are great. And Naughty Cafe, they have branches in Bacoor, Cavite, Valenzuela, Malabon, Nabotas, maybe in some areas. And please do subscribe to my YouTube channel. I do upload broadcast-related lectures there. So I would really appreciate, guys, if you would click that subscribe button. Even if you don't have any desire to watch periodically, at least please click the subscribe button. So thank you very much for listening, and I'm okay to take questions, any questions while smoking. Go ahead, Mr. Moderator.
Okay, guys, the table is now open for question and answer. Kindly put your questions to the chat box. Any questions, guys? Sir, we have a question from Mr. John Magcale. Sir, what's your take po regarding the issue sa ABS-CBN?
Anong issue? Sige, clarify mo yung question. Huwag kayo mahiya. I'll answer it.
Sir, kanina po may nagtanong din if meron daw po ba tayong omnidirectional antenna for TV broadcasting?
Omnidirectional antenna, example is ganito. Yung mga ganito, it's omnidirectional, any single element. Or the stock antenna of ABS-CBN and TV Plus is considered as omnidirectional. If you have multiple elements, then this is essentially a modified dipole. Diba? So a dipole would be pag ganito, ellipse. I have other antennas inside this room pero I cannot access my 14 element and my 22 element over there kasi medyo malaki. Okay, if you use an Omni antenna, the gain is low, so you're dependent on the signal strength alone. If it's weak already, then chances are you wouldn't get faithful reception. That's why we use high gain antennas or antennas which has more elements to provide gain, and the gain helps the weak signal to become a little bit stronger. Na-clarify na ba yung question kanina? Sa ABS?
Wala
yung
po,
issue
sir.
sa ABS. Can you cite some issues para mas
Siguro,
maganda?
siguro sir, about yun dun sa
Kasi if it's the issue with ABS, CBS, asking me,
siguro sir,
sa?
baka yun sa frequency. One franchise.
Okay. Ito. Franchise, sige, siguro sa program. Kasi, nakabalikan ko yung tanong niya. Kasi nawala ka agad. Sa akin, if the basis is the franchise and the programs, ABS-CBN has not violated any law because it is part of the capability of the technology to be able to support multiple programs. Okay? The franchise grants any broadcaster to operate a channel. And a channel is equivalent to 6 megahertz. Now, it's just so happened that the capability of ISDBT, or the digital broadcasting technology, allows you to make efficient use of the channel capacity. The traditional 6 megahertz in analog that can support one program only before can now support up to 8 programs. I'm limiting to 8 to maintain a certain quality, but it can go beyond that. You can even have high definition. So it's the capability of the technology. So if it's not, they're not operating in that sense multiple channel. They're using a single channel for multiple programs. Okay, so that answers that question. Okay, so it's not channel and channels. It's channel and programs. Now, when it comes to siguro yung issue na binabanggit na the difference is just one letter, channel and channels. Maybe it has something to do with ABS-CBN using their channel 16 for ABS-CBN and the channel 43 of what was the franchise name earlier? I mentioned Manila Broadcasting ba? In channel 43. So maybe that's the source of the channels. But they are two different franchises. They are two different franchises. So in effect, it's still a channel. Okay. Question from Jumar Bascos. What makes us so behind compared to other countries in digital broadcasting? Okay. The regulation is there. Our regulation from the NTC took us maybe 7 to 8 years before a decision was made, or even more maybe. Yeah. And then also the change in the leadership in the government. So we started during the time of President Gloria, and then natapos yung panahon ni Gloria went to, who's next after Gloria? Erap? Tama ba? No. Gloria and then President Aquino.
Yes, sir.
So the final decision came at the latter part of the President Aquino's term. So that actually contributed to the delays also. And then Of course, the broadcasters are required to follow any rules, regulation, or laws. Otherwise, their franchise would be at stake. Because if you are unable to follow certain regulations, then of course the government can resort to all remedies, maybe to give the frequency to another operator. But like what I have shown you earlier, that it's not that hard to really switch to digital for the broadcasters. The main challenge is the viewers who needs to move faster to migrate to digital also. Okay, next question. Diba? Daniel Espeña. Sir, hindi po ba we have a law that says that stations must switch to digital transmission? Was it implemented already? I mean, lahat po ba nag-switch na? Okay, we have a migration plan that was released by the DICT. It speaks about 2023 as the analog shut-off, which means, in theory, there should be no more analog transmission beyond 2023. And most of the networks, for example, in Mega Manila that I've shown you, have already started their digital transmission. Okay, almost all of them. Okay. Now, in the provinces, Cebu, Davao, I think Iloilo, Bacolod area, and Baguio, they already have digital broadcast there. So it's slowly being disseminated na rin. They're introducing digital services already in key cities. That's why if the government pushes harder, the broadcasters, then they would move faster. If there's no push from the government, then the broadcasters would take their time. Diba? Judging from the viewer experience pa lang, which would you prefer? The quality that you get from digital or analog? It's a no-brainer. Digital is always better in the experience. More questions?
Sir, there is a question. Sir, possible po bang gumamit ng satellite dish as antennae to transmit a channel? I'm too curious sa bahay na nadadaanan ko since I'm 5 years old. May satellite dish na nakabuild every time na napapadaan ako until now.
Well, iba yung purpose kasi ng satellite dish. Diba? A dish is used to make the transmission or reception directional. So, in theory, it's still an antenna. If you put the proper element, you can get a certain program. But do not expect that you will receive a lot of channels. Kasi you have to orient it specifically to a certain direction, di ba? The dish itself acts as a reflector lang naman to the actual antenna element, which is in the LNB. I don't have an LNB now. It's outside. Pero if you open, alam niyo ba LNB? Yung pickup element sa mga satellite dish. If you open it, there's a small dipole lang inside there. And that's the antenna. And then the dish itself acts as a reflector only. Questions? Thank you nga pala sa IECEP Quezon City student chapter for the pizza.
Sir, another question. In this line of work, is it exciting and enjoyable?
Oo naman. Exciting kasi you're in it eh. you're part of the action. It's also fulfilling. Pero syempre, malakas makadrain din, makapagod. Kasi, especially if you're doing a lot of field work. You know, if you're young, maybe up to the age of 35 years old, exciting ang field work sa'yo. But as you get older, gusto mo ibigay na yun sa mas bata.
Yeah.
The benefit of being the design engineer sa broadcasting, most of the time you become part of the implementation also. So whatever you did as an engineer would create an impact, either good or bad. If you made a mistake, then that would impact the end goal, the actual result. Kasi broadcast, di ba? It covers a wide area. If you made the wrong calculation, wrong, let's say, antenna configuration, then it might result into huge financial loss for the network. So it helps really to become, it makes you a better engineer. Unlike siguro sa ibang practice. Siguro sa, bigyan ng example sa telco, kung dinesign mo is mga cell sites and there was a mistake, that only affects a small area. If we talk of broadcast, it can be like a 60 to 70 kilometer radius. For telco, it can be 6 kilometer radius, 6 to 10 kilometer radius. Or if you go to 5G, maybe 400 meter radius. So, diba, the mitigation and the rectification would be easier, I guess.
Any more questions, guys? Di naman, sir.
Mukha na bore lang sila.
So, wala na po ata, sir. And on that note, sir, thank you very much, sir, for the time. And we hope that you will support IECEP QCSC for the further events and activities that will be happening at our organization. Thank you so much, sir. And for the participants, thank you very much din po for the time and effort na binigay niyo po for attending this webinar. For the survey for this webinar, I will send a link in the chat box, and afterwards you will get your electronic certificate for it. Once again, thank you so much and have a great day. Thank you, sir.